you absolutely are one of our key and essential partners to accomplishing out there around the globe what we have to accomplish each and every day. It is through your good work and your diligence based upon our requirements coming up with those solutions that will enable us to do what we've got to do out there on the battlefield. Okay, so with that, real quick, before I get into my opening remarks, I'll introduce everybody. Command Sergeant Major George Becker from United States Special Operations Command. Command Sergeant Major David Gibbs from SOC Africa. Command Master Chief Joe Larkin from SOC Corps. Command Sergeant Major Bill Thedford from JSOC. Fleet Master Chief. Oh, Force, sorry. God, man, screwed up my one chance to really be joint and show my... Oh, well. Force Link, Steve Link from NAVSPEC War. Command Sergeant Major Tony Pettengill from SOC PAC. Command Sergeant Major Tom Wall from SOC South. Command Chief Master Sergeant Bill Turner from AFSOC. Command Sergeant Major Chuck Sikelski from SOC Ure. And then Command Sergeant Major Jeff Stegall from SOC South, soon to be SOC North. Okay, so I'd like to just, the way we're going to do this is I'm going to make some general comments to really highlight and maybe expand a bit on things that you've heard not only from Admiral McCraven, my boss, but also all these guys' bosses up here as we move forward into what is going to be an absolutely new operating environment for us. Now, that may sound counterintuitive, a new operating environment for us. Why would what we have to do around the globe, post-declared theaters of active combat, be new to special operations? Well, it goes to some of the things you've heard all of the commanders say. We have had 12 years of kicking indoors or advising and assisting folks on how to kick indoors. And the force is going to require a re-bluing to get back to our core competencies. You know, some of the examples are Admiral Pye was talking today. All those years of land warfare that the SEALs have been doing, there has been a degradation to their ability to conduct maritime operations. We have a new component, MARSOC, that ever since they've gotten into the fight have done the war in Afghanistan. What is their role? They're only 7 years old, so they don't even have a history to fall back on. And this is what I mean by the new operating environment, because there is going to be a rebluing of the force that has to go on. So the theme of this topic is broadening trust. And I think all the commanders have absolutely covered in great detail the broadening of the trust as it pertains to the expanding global SOF network and how that interacts with you, our partners in the industry, our partner nations, our interagency partners across the board. But there's going to be a degree of broadening trust, frankly, internal to the force. Because we're also in a time of transition within the Department of Defense. Everyone has talked about the possible effects of sequestration, this, that, and the other. So the things that myself and my counterparts up here, my peers up here deal with is a force that has lots of questions about, hey, we're coming out of war. What is it that we're going to do next? Well, that one's pretty easy to answer because, frankly, I think Admiral McCraven's vision is not only articulate, but terse and to the point. It's not difficult to understand. But when you lay that out, and you look at that spinning globe with all those multicolored lines across it, what they see, wow, how am I going to accomplish all that? And at the same time, we're going to preserve the force and the families there, Sergeant Major, or Command Master Chief, or Chief Master Sergeant, or whatever. You know, what is it that the Admiral's asking us to do? So there is a degree of trust that has to be built in the force as we manage this, and we are probably going to have to manage a cut. All right? So that's one of the things that we focus on, and I throw that theme out there to maybe prime the pump of any questions that you may have out there. You know, it's been interesting as I've gone to the executive forums and the other forums around here, some of the questions that you in industry are asking us. And there's a theme in there of, hey, as I try to understand your requirements, Admiral McCraven or General Votel or whoever, and I'm going to meet those requirements to help you achieve Commander U.S. SOCOM's vision for 2020, you know what I need is, I need some scenarios, or I need mission-based this and mission-based that. And here's what I would tell you. In my opinion, I don't know that we'll ever be able to give you a mission or a scenario, but here's why. Generally in the Department of Defense, you try to determine requirements based upon two things, either threat-based or capabilities-based. Now, from a SOCOM perspective, we can tell you the threat base, but you know what? It's amorphous, because it's combating violent extremist networks. General Votel talked earlier this morning about assisting in law enforcement in states. Law enforcement in states. Well, if I do that, then the threat networks are countering narcotics, which we've always had in our portfolio. But what about the human trafficking and other international criminal organizations out there that still present not only a threat to our security in the homeland, but also present a threat to our partner nations and their ultimate stability? So, from that perspective, who could possibly come up with a scenario for a threat-based capability to generate requirements? It would be a little difficult to do. And this is what we struggle with inside the headquarters, and this is what we up here struggle with, is we talk to the force and go to our commanders and try to articulate these requirements up there, because at the end of the day, what they need is they need capabilities that will fight these. Back to the trust internal to the force. Every operator out there on the ground, every CINSI, every MISO, every CS, every CSS, they want their organic, soft, unique, MFP-11 funded, whatever, capability. Well, if I'm going to leverage DEA authorities or FBI authorities, and we're going to be in partner and concert with them, we are not entering into a fiscal environment where you, our industry partners, need to hand us a piece of redundant kit. We're going to have to become a lot more interoperable on the interagency side of the house as well. I mentioned this last year as you look at helping us meet the requirements. One of our requirements out there is to build partner nation capacity. 90% of our partner nations cannot afford our technology. And even if they could afford it, it's not the way they do business in their country to satisfy their security needs. So, a lot of what we need out there on the ground is all of our forces work with our partner nations, and they try to not put the American solution on country X, but give American advice and assistance to country X's own solution. We're going to require equipment or technology or other things that will pop up, and this is where, thank God, we've got the flexibility to resource these types of things very quickly. It's going to meet their needs, and it's not always going to be high-tech. It's not always going to be high-tech. They don't necessarily have the bandwidth or other things like that, and frankly, in our experience, as they go to maintain their security, their predominant methodology is a human intelligence network. We can give them the assistance then from a knowledge management position and from a data mining position and other things like that that remains low cost yet effective and something that we can train them on. And so, at an earlier forum, we were talking about innovation. And I think these are unique business opportunities for y'all, because then it's not about just SOCOM, it is about us being able to provide that equipment and that training and that maintenance of that stuff to our partner nations out there as we try to increase their stability. And then my last point, one thing that came up was on education. And I'm not going to belabor the point. If anybody in the audience is interested in the education piece, because a couple of questions have been asked at some of the commander forums, we'll be more than happy to get deeper into education, because that's obviously a realm that we as the NCOs are knee-deep in when it comes to our non-commissioned officer corps out there. And so with that, I would like to go ahead and open it up for questions from the audience so that we've got plenty of time for that. Because if I gave these guys 5 minutes, with 12 of them up here, one, they take more, and then you use up all the time. So.
Okay, thank you, Sergeant Major Ferris. Questions?
Okay, first rule of public speaking, if I don't get at least one, that means I suck.
We'll get one.
You can't send me to the gala tonight with low self-esteem, seriously?
Let me start with one.
Oh, a loaded question.
You got one, Jim?
Yeah, Sergeant Major, how do you guys think we can improve getting operator input into the acquisition processing on the requirement side, or when we have kits? Is there some things we can do better either direct with industry or with the acquisition group? As we come off the battlefield,
question was, how do we ensure that we're getting rapid and effective operator input into our requirements, especially as we come off of the battlefield and we get ready for this new environment? George, you've got a huge stake in this, man, if you want to start us right here.
How can I answer that effectively? I don't think we really have a problem with receiving the input. I think it's the process of submitting the input and then having the speed of effectiveness, getting the equipment changed and then acquiring your equipment effectively, quickly, back to the operator. I think the input's always there, but I think it's the aspect of how quickly you can provide the input, how quickly you can turn it around based on the industry and what it is you're trying to input, and what the statement of work or what the requirements were at the beginning. I think operator input has really evolved over the years, and their ability to provide a lot of input has changed from when I first came in the Army. In fact, I think sometimes you'll get more input than you really ask for. But I don't think input's the issue. I think it's the processes of getting the input to the manufacturer or to the industry and then trying to work back and forth with the contract, so forth, and then the legal aspects of all the processes that you have to go through to get the input pushed in. I thought rapid fielding worked very well in the Army. And there's some other avenues that I saw during the war. I think in the Army we might suffer a little bit of issues after the war once we become back into form instead of function. But I think input is not the issue. Once again, I think it's a process. So, unless I'm wrong in that aspect. But I see a lot of equipment, new equipment every day. So I can't honestly say that generating the input and the change is a problem.
I would just say that.
Add to that, I'm sorry. Within JSOC we have a couple units whose charter is to go out and find and develop the very best equipment that you all can provide us. And if it proves out and it's worthy, durable piece of kit, then that charter says that we will spread it out amongst the greater SOF community and ultimately to the general purpose forces. So what may seem like a small quantity and not very exciting to your stockholders, eventually if it's a good piece of kit, it'll spread and then you'll get the results you're looking for. So a young guy on a team has an idea for a new piece of equipment or how to improve something he's already got, then we'll put him with someone that knows the acquisition and the R&D process and kind of coach him through, really stating what is the requirement, so we're not just chasing good ideas, and then and help it along so you do have really the information you need to send it out to the industry.
Yeah, I think that was a great answer, and I think Sordak does a great job. You guys move almost as fast as my boss. Almost. He moves very quickly, and we're standing up the combat development divisions within some of our organizations so that we can make sure that we're getting the latest and greatest technology out to the folks that are on the battlefield, whether they're on the ground or in the air, whatever it is. I think that as long as we close with you guys to make sure that we're staying within our legal and ethical boundaries, and then we can work right with industry to make sure that we're getting what we need out there so that we can enable the fight, then I think we're doing good. But the legal and ethical piece is where, ethical we got, but the legal piece, there's a lot of legal, left and right limits that we need to know, and you guys obviously keep us in our lanes.
I obviously agree with everything that my fellows have said up here, but I think one of the dynamics that's going to change that you got to keep in mind is, and it's been iterated, the TSOCs are becoming the belly button for 99.9% everything that Special Operations is going to do out there. And last year, as Admiral McCraven came in, for those of you that were here, we introduced, frankly, that fact into our SVP process, when the commander talked about that. Requirements are going to come from the TSOCs. So I think that we'll get more input and probably ultimately more relevant, cohesive input, because you're going to have these after actions coming out of the SOC forwards and other things like that through the TSOCs that will be much more immediate, much more relevant, and more importantly, within a campaign plan. It's not that the equipment we have today, you didn't have good operator input into the requirements, but those requirements were hey, I was here in country X and needed this, and I was in country Z on another continent, and then you try to cobble together the one piece of kit that sort of does both. And so I think we'll get a much more cohesive input as we work out the processes of the TSOCs, put those requirements in on there. But frankly, for the first time in SOCOM's history, we'll have these requirements based upon a campaign's instinct. And we have never had our requirements informed by that. Prior to that, I think we have always been and debated and waffled, depending upon commander and personality, between we either have threat-based capability or we just got a lot of tools in the toolkit. And, I think we've been a victim of a lot of tools in the toolkit because that brings out a lot of good idea fairies. And during the time of largesse, every good idea fairy idea gets funded, and that's coming to an end. That's not going to happen. We've got to sort this out, and there's a much more rigorous process with the TSOCs having to concur as the warfighters. Yes, this is a requirement that I need within my AOR to do that. So everything they said, I don't see that NCO input going away, that operator input going away. I think it'll be a little more directed in terms of what are valid and invalid requirements for the areas in which we invest.
I think we have a question here.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm Probe Thompson. The question I have is about a sort of a paradox in education and training, but not specifically with our own forces. A number of years ago, I believe it was Admiral Olson, had discussed, during his presentation, spoke to the industry and stated, we have to do a better job of supporting our partners, because while we continue to drive the line up on technology, we send equipment over that 6 months later it's broken, it's in a hangar, they can't maintain it. Now, because of the situation we're in today, and we continue to hear in all these presentations, as a force multiplier, we know we need to continue to drive that technology up with a smaller force to support. Yet it seems then that will continue to widen the gap between, and I'm talking about not our first world partners, and that's why I'm asking you gentlemen to address it in different places, especially when we're talking about some of the third world countries. They're very intelligent people, but they may not be formally educated. So while that technology goes up, how do we produce that equipment, or more importantly, how do we prepare to train? That's what you gentlemen do. NCOs provide the best training of our forces for our own, but how are we going to address that issue as that gap widens? So our guys are better, but we can't send this equipment over because it's either not going to operate or be broken. That I'm clear?
Yeah, and sir, I think you're absolutely right. It is a paradox, and it sort of got into one of my opening comments about looking for solutions for our partner nations. One of the things that we run into out there is we show up on the battlefield, or we show up in a country to train. Well, we've got all our high-speed kit, and that ODA or that SEAL platoon breaks out the small deployable medium satellite dish that's got 3 meg pipes, and suddenly plug it in and you've got secure comms and secure computers, and it's all on one ISU-90, and our partners can be overwhelmed by that. Or you get their leadership and says, that's cool, I want it. And then that's where it ends up broken in the warehouses, because you don't have the wherewithal to give them the capability to manage something like that. So from my experience in this war, with a lot of either the 1206 or 1208 programs that we have been able to do with our partner nations, we have got to be careful that we mitigate that ourselves, because that's part of the advise part of our train, assist, and advise. Okay, it's great that I've got this, but here's what you guys can do and what you guys can maintain. Now, the other thing that I've seen, though, is we can give them some of this high-tech equipment, but it's managing expectations. It's not for everyone. If this is for your special operations force out there, but you're going to have to give me the 10 or 15 really smart cats that I can train on this piece of kit and how to use it, and then be able to sustain it. And one point on that where we've seen it happen is frankly through the NATO soft headquarters. All of you have heard Admiral McRaven talk about it as an analogy for the RSCCs and whatnot. But beyond the native soil headquarters, what happened there was we stood up a training school out in Chevis. And that was all Americans that taught. And SOCOM funded the biometric gear and everything that you guys have provided us so that they could take it into the battlefield in Afghanistan. Within a few short years, it wasn't Americans teaching these classes anymore. The subject matter expert on all things biometrics was a Czech sergeant, an EA, in their army. And so that's one of the things about the RSCCs that we're looking about that the Admiral laid out in expanding the Global Soft Network is, once again, that'll be another venue for them to come together in an environment to discuss what their solutions are with us in the background, listening, advising, and then helping them to get that out there. So I think that the force right now is pretty aware of that problem and that issue, but more importantly, obviously, the leadership is, and the TSOC commanders are definitely aware of that. And again, as long as we're sticking to their requirements, I think we'll be able to manage that quite well across the force. Any TSOCs or anybody want to jump in?
Yeah, Sergeant Major, I think also, in addition to what you said, Sergeant Major, you talked about the campaign plan approach. The TSOC commanders also talked about persistent engagement. That's how we're going to ensure the equipment is getting utilized, maintained. It's part of continued persistent engagement. One of the commanders alluded to yesterday also, it's part of making sure we're, each time as we engage with a unit or an organization with our partner nations, it's not a different group of folks once a year where we're starting from scratch. So I think also through that persistence we'll be able to mitigate some of the risk with losing that technology just getting put on a shelf, breaking.
You know, another thing we're going to have to be looking at is, it ties directly to this, is we talk about the equipment, we're talking about assessments in general. As we look to build partner force capacity and we're providing them, you know, equipment, providing them training, it's one, we're partnering with the right forces. Are they getting the right training? Are they, is there a continuation of what was taught on one exercise sustained into the next one? So we talk about the persistent presence, but with that, you know, as industry, we've got to look at ways to do assessments and how that all ties back into our common American picture and how that ties back to our country action plans and then back to our theater campaign plans.
Yeah, and oh, good.
And I would also just add that many times we do have the right training, we do have the right partner force, we have the persistent engagement, but as Command Sergeant Major Farrar said, we're teaching something at a highly technical, highly expensive skill, and we come back after 2 years and that person has left that community, joined the civilian force, and is making a lot of money. In some of these countries, we end up starting over, or that equipment gets shelved simply because it's in such high demand by the civilian sector. They take those individuals back out of the military that we partnered with.
And to touch on something that Sergeant Major Pettengill just talked about, because at the end of the day, a lot of what we're doing out there today is not necessarily about the equipment. And I'll give you an example of an assessment that, frankly, that Admiral McRaven and I just made out in the Philippines last January. Through all the years of us being in the southern Philippines and working with them, getting their force capable to fight an insurgency, training them how to do COIN, security is only the first step. Then you have governance, and you have rule of law, and you have all of this stuff, and you're partnered with the Department of State on this. And so the battalion commander down there brought us in, and he had this really nice poster board thing, and it was a flow chart of how he was going to negotiate and do a settled peace. And it was awesome. Sat there and asked this guy, my God, you know, did you graduate from Harvard? Did you graduate from Yale? Who taught you this? No, it was the Asia Pacific Center. You know, you've got the guys on the ground that recognize the ultimate solution in this isn't going to be a weapon, it's not going to be a bullet, it's not going to be this, it's going to be the education of this. And so they did the right things. They got him down to Hawaii, to the Asia Pacific Center, to all these forums and all these courses. And this 05 developed this. Now, that's one thing to do that with that battalion commander. But he was now teaching his subordinate officers in the exact same stuff. And the guy had become a believer. I hope one day he's the chief of the Filipino Armed Forces. Maybe he probably won't be. But that's the other aspect of this, that is, we do those assessments out there on the ground, one, who we're going to partner with and stuff. It is, once again, this holistic piece that has to be looked at. It's not always just the technology, but what education forums can we provide them as well.
What I've seen in the Southcom AOR, and with your question, as soon as you finish your question, the first thing that popped to my mind, Sergeant Major Gibbs hit it right on the head, was that persistent engagement. The other thing that I've seen in the Southcom AOR is prioritizing the units that we're working with. And we may have to do more of that depending on the resources and what's going on in the near future. What I've seen is that some of the units that we're working with, we've established a selection process. So you get volunteers that want to come into those programs and be a part of that unit. And obviously, everybody up here has been through that, and that's what makes a force different. You got people that want to be a part of that unit, that want to learn, and with that comes the technology piece. When you get people that want to be in those units, who want to learn, I think it's just inherent amongst them that they're going to continue that. When you start having the gaps, that's when you start having your issues, and for whatever reason, training stops. But I would tell you that, Columbia, we've been dealing with Columbia for 25 years. I was there back in the early 90s dealing with them, and I was scratching my head thinking to myself, what in the world's going on? But now they're got one of the best militaries in South America, and are exporting their security to other countries, as well as Chile and Brazil. So I think it's that persistent engagement is key to...
At a level that I had to, when I grew up basically in my own AOR almost 24/7. So we have to take a lot of things into consideration. So with that being said, I'm not concerned with it, and I think we're on the right path. And honestly, I think we should be concerned with other things here in the future.
Beneath the question is the idea, is there any innovation that industry or academia could produce that would make it easier to recapture that? I don't know and have an idea what that would be, but is that an area where an investment of some innovation might improve the training efficiency or effectiveness, or time required to create efficiency?
I'd like the Matrix plug into the back of the neck thing.
I think there's a million ways, honestly, that you can attack a problem. And if you get enough people together, they will continue to come up with different courses of action and how to provide an end state on how you can train the troop to do something. Once again, the language lab, the language courses that we run, the language labs of the groups, the DLIs and so forth are many avenues that we use, the Rosetta Stone that they can take home and so forth and so on. The native speakers that are recruited not on purpose, but that just happen to come through the force based on the multicultural society that we have in America, I think are really sufficient with what we have now, to be very honest with you. Once again, I think people are overstating the problem. It will take a few years to fix the problem. It's just like it took us 12 years to win 2 wars. All right? And it is about priorities. And, commanders will set priorities, and then we focus on those priorities. When those priorities are done, then we set new priorities and move on. I think there's many avenues and many concepts and ways out there on how to teach language or how to instruct language. Personally, I think you reach a person to a certain level, and the best way is to get him in country, and then he starts using the skill set.
It'll always be a journey.
Immersion is probably the best system I've ever seen in my life. Leave a guy alone long enough somewhere and he can't get a cab on his own, he's going to figure it out. All right? So, I'm not trying to understate the problem. It is an issue for us, but we are working on it, and it is a priority for the commander and the unit.
Great, thank you.
And I would add that they're doing a fantastic job, but in the Asia Pacific we have 3,000 languages, so you guys continue to produce good products, and I would just encourage you to continue to do the same as we look at smart app technology and things that we can use now that they could load onto a device that can do multiple things. and better prepare a whole team, because right now the construct is you break up a team, 36 countries, 3,000 languages, so you may be in one country one time and another country on another deployment. They try to do as best they can to get them regionally aligned to those, whether it's Southeast Asia, South Asia, etc. However, 3,000 languages, there's always room to improve in our capability.
Sir, I got a comment to your point. When I was a SWIC Sergeant Major 3 years ago, we did a study. We realized that about 10 to 15% of all the guys who graduate the Q course are able to go above the 1.1 to 2.2, 3.3 level. I think it would be interesting to see if we could ever come up with some sort of technology or modality that we can get guys who kind of baseline and never can get above the 2.2 level. If there was some other way to train these guys to increase our numbers from the current way we're training our guys to get them up to the higher levels of language capability we're trying to attain. Right.
Other questions?
Venture to say, especially to you people in industry, that it's not just an American problem. There are a lot of, I'm at SOC 4, so we're unique among everyone else. We have one country, one language, and we have trouble with that. But the ROCs are also in need of some language assistance, some translation interpreter assistance, as they will utilize some of our aircraft, for instance, to do certain things. And as from the JTAC side, call for fire, some of those things. And if they can't speak the language that our pilots speak, then they're ineffective on the ground. So from the industry side, it's not just a U.S. problem. I think that there's a much broader pool out there that you guys and gals can tap into when you think about the other countries that we will be working with and will be working with us.
Other questions?
General Cleveland, in his remarks this morning, talked about the human domain becoming increasingly relevant in SOF operations. How are you encountering that at your levels? And what are the challenges associated with operating within the human domain?
Okay, obviously, as Admiral McCraven has adopted that, it's in the vision, and we move forward amongst the components on the man, train, and equip side. We have absolutely still have to fight. I think within the bigger services, not fight. There's a very healthy discussion going on. Fight is a mischaracterization. There's a very healthy discussion going on, and I think everybody in this room is savvy enough to know why. Because the human domain is a subcomponent of the land domain, and why should it be its own domain? And Admiral McCraven's attitude is no. Special operations functions every day and night inside the human domain. General Cleveland talked about it today, where on the precision strike side of the house, everything we need is about squeezing certainty into uncertainty. But the rest of it, we're designed to go into those uncertain areas. And the biggest way you're going to sort out what's going on and what happens is through this human domain. So this is going to have, I think, huge .mil-PF repercussions as our J79 through the FMD is rewriting Special Operations Doctrine to incorporate this, because we've got to get the E5, E6, O3 on the ground that's in and amongst this human domain, beyond just our MISO and our SIMSIs that definitely understand it perhaps a little bit better, to go beyond just the relationship piece of it and begin to see those interactions that occur out there on a daily basis. And as they collect this, we can't lose it. During episodic contacts, whether it's JSETs or CNs or whatever, how do we collect it? How do we data mine it? How do we manage it? How do we make it available across the entire network? And absolutely the things we're learning from the JSOC side of the house on their identity resolution for what they do. How can you take that and turn it into that wire diagram for a village, for a district, for a province, We still haven't gotten that right in Afghanistan. After 12 years, we still haven't done it. Not as an entire force. There's no place in ISAF where you can go and figure that out. You can absolutely figure it out within Sojit A to where SOF has touched. But you're asking different questions there. So how do we adapt it to the 36 countries and 3,000 languages and everything else that these TSOC guys deal with on a daily basis? How do you tie that together on a continent like Africa, where you've got sub-regions within an entire AOR? And because colonial powers drew country lines, but the tribe exists in 4 different countries, straddling the corner of those borders. How do we do that? So this human domain is what we operate in each and every day, and it is going to become, I believe, an absolute cornerstone to our training, to better understanding it beyond what we do just within our traditional UW or IW context. It's going to have to become a lot more important. So this is something that we're beginning to work through from a .NLPF standpoint, but I'll tell you from an industry standpoint, it gets back to what you've heard over and over and over again. Data mining, knowledge management, all of this stuff. How can we do it? How can we use it? And then how can you get it immediately from the operator on the ground into these larger databases that will feed the network out there. So that's where I see it sitting from Tampa. I don't know about my TSOC brothers or components. Anybody? You guys don't want to touch that.
Questions from the audience? I think all of us, if you're looking at your BlackBerry, your smartphone on any given day, you're probably going to see announcements or invitations for some cyber conference. Cyber this, cyber that. You could probably on any given week attend 2 conferences if you had the time and the inclination to do so. It's just how prolific the topic is being discussed out there within government, within industry. One of the TSOC commanders said that cyber is a growth area for SOF. How so?
Well, it's not going to be a growth area everywhere. It's interesting. I was just in a previous brief that had nothing to do with what we're talking about, but they were showing the proliferation of something via cyber. And if you remember Admiral Olson's old photo of the dark spaces, well, those dark spaces, there's no proliferation of those dots from the cyber world. So I think on a day-to-day basis in the 78 countries that we're in where you're building partner nation capacity, cyber's not going to be at that tactical level. It's just not going to be. Cyber is going to be a growth industry at the operational and at the strategic level as we work with Cyber Command, if they ever get their authorities straightened out and we can ever begin this thing. But it's absolutely going to be a tool that we'll be able to use. But it's not going to be at that tactical level, in my opinion, on a day-to-day basis. I don't see the TSOC commanders wanting that ODA or SEAL platoon on the ground, hey, I need to do this cyber this or that. No, it'll be at that operational and strategic level and part of a larger influence campaign as we use it. Now, having said that, we've got obviously 2 elements that they may incorporate it at the tactical level to achieve those ends, and I think that's our VISO and our SIMSI folks out there. But we're a long way as a government from ever sorting out what this cyber is going to be in an offensive role. Right now, everything is very defensive, obviously, in nature.
Okay. Questions from the audience?
It's okay if you don't have any, because then that means I get to get my wife home earlier to get dressed for the Okay, well, but I do want to make a closing comment because I left this out intentionally because I want to separate it from all the rest of this. You've heard Admiral McCraven state it, and I'm going to reiterate it now. Preservation of the force and families is an absolute priority for this command. Because all the things that we're talking about here this week won't amount to a hill of beans if we don't have a force that can be employed. Okay, so I know some of you may be in the room, but a lot of people here at the conference are already working with the Preservation of the Forced and Families Task Force as we go to do the enterprise-wide contract for mental health providers, nurse case managers, et cetera, et cetera. But this is key, and it's essential to what we're doing. And it's not just about the resiliency side of the house. Everybody's got lots of solutions for the resiliency side of the house, and quite frankly, on the human performance side, I think we're doing very good. I think we're doing very good on the resiliency of the physical side of the house. Where we're still having to struggle is frankly on the mental and spiritual side of the house. And as we draw down out of this war, not only as SOCON, but everybody sees it within the Department of Defense. Things that are being struggled with. Right now, last year, 349 suicides in the Department of Defense, almost one a day. Currently within DOD, 188. What day are we on in the year? Again, almost one a day. Suicides are just an indicator of what's going on. Just an indicator of what's going on. And we've got our own internal cultural problems that we are dealing with in terms of stigma and other things like that. But if this is your area of expertise, we need your help in coming up with innovative ways. And here's why I say innovative ways, and this is so important. It's interesting, as my wife and I travel around, how many spouses of our service members come up and go, I got it that they offer this nutrition class, I got it that they offer this, and I got it that they offer that. But it's always about him. They want me to go to the grocery store and buy something green for him so that he can fight better. And after 12 years of war, I'm tired of being a cog in his wheel. I want my own wheel. And so we've even got marketing issues in terms of the stigmas, And I don't disagree with those spouses. Where's her nutrition for stress-free 7-month deployment with 3 screaming Mimi kids diet? And other things like that. And so it's a bit sociology, it's a bit anthropology, it's a bit marketing, it's a bit all of that. But we've got to have innovative ways to do this. And the last thing I'll leave you with is this. And I had a wise man, Sergeant Major Mike Hall, that taught me this. You've heard the commander and all the commanders talk about us maintaining our comparative advantage. We've got to have the comparative advantage with our enemy. We've got to have a comparative advantage within our peer groups to remain the best special operations in the world. In order to do that, and especially in a fiscally constrained environment, we can no longer afford to do evolutionary, incremental solutions to our problems. We have got to do revolutionary things. And is the message out? Can I talk about it? Okay. There's a message coming out today for something we're calling the TALOS, the Tactical, what is it? Tactical Assault Light Operator Suit. There is no one industry that can build that. It's going to take a cooperative nature. Cooperation from you as industry partners. It might mean you may have to lay out your intellectual property on the table next to a competitor that you may not want to. But we've got to get over that. Because if you can develop the articulated arm or the heads-up display for this, but you can't develop the power, then how are we going to do this to come up with something truly revolutionary? And we are going to invest in revolutionary things. We cannot afford this incremental evolutionary thing. As we look at possible sequestration and other things like that, and we go to cut BOIs or extend life cycles of existing things that we have today, you guys are going to have to come up with more innovative ways, not for the technology for us, but more innovative ways to work together as industry to be the revolutionary partner that we need as we move forward in the future. And so with that, thank you all very much. We appreciate the time, and most importantly, appreciate that you're going to let me get my wife home an extra half hour early to get ready for the gala tonight. Even though she did do her hair this morning.